Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And I could not be more excited for today's episode because we have a father and daughter team for you to learn from. But before I introduce you to our guest today, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Randy Long and his daughter, Ellen Long, which I am so excited about. So let me tell you a little bit about Ellen. Ellen works with her father to help build and sell family-oriented companies. She's also given a TEDx talk called The Journey to Enough, Your Minimal Viable Happiness. And she won the Women to Watch Award for the leadership class in Wilmington in 2013. So Ellen is a powerhouse that we can learn from. And Randy is the CEO of Long Business Advisors, and he's the creator of the Bulletproof Exit Process. He's written 2 books. He's an attorney. He's a CFP. He pretty much can help any family business exit on their terms where they can take the money and still maintain their relationships. So make sure you buckle up because Ellen and Randy are going to take us for a ride. Welcome, and thank you so much for being a guest on today's show.
Oh, it's our pleasure, really.
So we are here to learn because, as you know, this podcast is all about relationships, personal and business relationships. And when you have a family business, I think they say that weddings and real estate brings out the worst in people. I think I've heard that.
Yeah.
I think right up there are the family business dynamics. So take us wherever you'd like. Start from the beginning, start from the end, and work back. We're here to listen.
Okay. Ellen, set the stage for us, sweetheart.
I think family business, we love family business, obviously, because we're one of them. And so one of our big goals is helping family businesses relationally, which of course is your expertise. So you're probably even better at it than we are. But one of the goals we always say is we want the family to be able to get together for Thanksgiving and have a wonderful time together. And so I think what happens a lot of time in family business relationships is you have your family and then you have the business. And a lot of times the business gets, into the family dynamics and it becomes a very chaotic space. So we want the family to help the business and the business to also help the family. So it should be a symbiotic relationship where both parties are winning because we truly believe families can help each other the most. And so that's what we try to do.
So why is that, Ellen? When you say families can help each other the most, tell us a little bit more about that.
I just think about my family. So my siblings and we have helped each other write resumes for grad school.
You're one of 5, is that right?
One of 5, yeah, second of 5. So we help each other edit, we help each other write resumes. We help each other with business ideas. So I think when you have a really strong family culture and you all grow up in it, we all are entrepreneur minded in some way. And so when you have a strong family culture that also is about helping each other and growing each other, there's just really strong ties and you also know each other so well. And so you can, that can either be a positive or a negative. And so we try to make that as positive as we can.
Great.
Yeah, even on our books, I was going to say, my son, Micah, who's a tax attorney in Charlotte, North Carolina, he and Ellen worked on both of the books that we wrote. It was sort of a joint writing, if you will, because it was just a great way. I would just download the information. I would talk about, they would take notes, they would write up the draft, and then we would work through it and rewrite it and all that sort of thing. So even on the books, it was a family affair. We do love family businesses. I have, as a lawyer, I practiced for 30 years, and my whole market was family businesses. So we did essentially the estate planning and administration, and then we did transactional work for the businesses themselves. So we got to see lots and lots and lots and lots of estate plans go full cycle, if you will, I should say, so that a lot of times I think lawyers draft things that sometimes the clients want, but they don't really understand what they need. And so they draft the stuff and then they don't do a trust. Maybe they don't do administrations or somebody else does it later. They don't see the back end of their work on the planning on the front. And so I've seen so many of these things, and part of what I learned from all of that over all those years is that you have to set the family up in the front end of those estate plans and on those gifting arrangements and everything else to make sure that the whole family is benefited and understands why and how it works and why it is that way. And so we're always trying to kind of look ahead. Part of what we do is to eliminate conflict that we see that would be in the future as a result of decisions that are made by the business owner and or the father and mother for estate planning purposes. So we just don't like situations where people are they're injecting conflict to come, and then when they're gone, everything just blows up. So
okay,
Ellen's
so
example.
tell us a little bit about when you said the front end for the listeners versus the back end. Just to be clear, and then I have a couple of questions because.
So the front end would be so a lot of what we do when we're doing exit planning work on the front end of the work, we do sort of the defense, if you will. We want to have the estate planning done in place. We want to know what's going to happen in the event of the death or disability of the owner. We want the business to know, and we want the family to know. So on the front end of that, the estate plan is done. The back end of an estate plan is essentially when the owner dies. And so you get the execution.
When it's executed. Yeah.
That's right. So you get an execution of the plan.
It's also about structure. So what is your business structure set up as, and looking down the road, how is the kid going to think about this? How is and so we try to put ourselves in each of the person's shoes, really. So if I'm the daughter or the son that's looking to take over the business, what are my feelings about this? What am I thinking? And so we interview every party and try to say, okay, what is your plans for the future? What are your dreams for the future? And seeing where there's alignment, where there's going to be conflict, and trying to get ahead of that, having those conversations ahead of time, putting the structure in place. And really, honestly, a lot about it is just communication. And I know that's so important, right? To have open and honest communication. A lot of times family businesses, that's their biggest struggle, is really having that open, honest communication along the way, so that the kid isn't harboring bitterness or resentment for what's happening, or the parent doesn't feel like they're getting, overtaken by their kid who wants to take the business over. So that there's a lot of components in that. And so part of it is just trying to help them flesh that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is great. So both of you mentioned the kid, but we know that it's when there's the kids that it becomes complicated. And let's not forget the kids probably have spouses that change the dynamic. So speak a little bit about, give us a story of when something went awry, not because you didn't set it up and structure it right, but the family dynamic, many times the personal family dynamic, if, for lack of a better word, if that's toxic, it is almost impossible for that toxicity to not infiltrate the family business. And I will tell you, so the DeVosses that started Amway, right? I know for a fact that, and all politics aside, I'm not getting involved with politics here, right? But Betsy DeVos has said to someone that I know that her and her husband feel very strongly that in leaving the legacy of the business and the monies and the inheritance and the estate planning, they would be heartbroken if they thought the monies that are inherited, changes the family dynamics and also changes their values, because they have very strong Christian values.
Right.
But normally it does. And we all know it takes 3 generations to destroy a business. Mm-hmm. So help us, share with us by illustrating where maybe you came in and rescued where somebody else did a terrible job, or maybe not so good, and it belongs to the rescue.
Yeah. So one of the cases that we took probably 8 or 9 years ago now, was a situation where it was a second generation business at the time. The second generation, we were brought in by the CPA firm to help the second generation owner transition out of the business. Okay. So there were the dad at the beginning, so the founder of the whole business, he had left shares to each of his three kids, but the most shares to the kid that was running the company. Okay. And so over the years,
I'm already hearing like, if you want to destroy sibling relationship, give one more than the others.
That's one thing. There's a couple of different ways to look at that too. And we'll discuss that very issue in just a minute. Okay. But in this particular situation, the third kid who we're going to transition to, we come into the meeting, and I had taken the estate planning documents and I'd reviewed them all before I had the first meeting with the family. And as I sat down and I talked through what their plan was right now, I said, look, I know you probably don't intend this, but I don't know if you're aware, but your current plan says that your son is going to inherit 90% of your net worth and your daughter is going to inherit about 10. That is the plan that's in place. And they work with a great CPA firm and a great law firm, but nobody was monitoring it and keeping up with it. So it had gotten old, right? And the people, it had been done.
Oh, you mean it was established years ago?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times what happens is when you have a kid working in the business, they might get, their inheritance will be the business, and then the other kids, the other
everything else.
Yeah. So the problem was the business had tripled from the time that they had done the first estate plan. So while it might have been 50-50 when they did it, right? Now the business has tripled and all the other monies had stayed pretty constant. And so instead of 50-50, now it's 90-10. So it's not that we find that people have made mistakes. It's that they're not keeping up. You have to keep up with it and not paying attention to how things have changed.
And how often should you review the plan, the estate plan for a family?
We would typically say every 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And I guess that's aligned with exponential growth you would expect in a business?
It depends on how fast the company's growing, because with a number of the companies that we tend to work with, we need to review planning every year because we are trying to take advantage of changes and tax laws and all the things, because they're just worth too much money, so they have to think further ahead, I think, than most of the small kind of medium businesses do. But it's probably more fun, honestly, to work with the small, medium business owners than it is the bigger ones in general, just because.
Why is that? Yeah.
I think it's because a lot of times what happens in the medium-sized businesses, especially, is they start their company and they have a CPA, a local lawyer that they do business with. Maybe they went to high school with them or something. So they basically grow the business with this counsel. And of course, let's say if I'm a CPA firm or I'm the law firm and my market is small business, when the company crosses a certain threshold, I'm out of my element as the advisor. Now, a lot of times the owner doesn't recognize it, and the professionals, they want to hold on to their good client, so they kind of ignore it. I'll give you a really good example of this. One of my clients, I had for some years, and I had been telling them for 3 years, and I put it in the minutes of the corporation at the corporate meetings. You need a new CPA firm. This CPA firm, you have left them behind years ago. They are going to hurt us one day, right? 3 years, I forced them to put it in the minutes. And so we come along and they get a tax bill, $4 million tax bill, penalties, interest, all this stuff, right?
Now you have their attention.
Yes. So now they've brought me back in and they're like, okay, you were right. Can you help us fix this? So I come in, I hire a tax attorney to come in and work with us on this whole thing. And then we're in the meeting and the CPA firm is sitting across the table and I'm on one end and the tax attorney's on the other and the family's on the other side. And so the tax attorneys, I say, okay, let's do what we have to do first so we can start planning. And then the tax attorney says, CPA firm, you're fired. So we just had them there to let them know that this tax bill was essentially their fault. My clients weren't going to sue them because that's not who they are.
Right.
So we let them go. We brought in the team and we got the work done. But see, this wasn't super hard though, because the company had grown, it was growing through, and it grew through $25 million in sales. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, the company's accounting needed to flip over to accrual accounting. And the CPA firm didn't know that because they didn't work in that large of a market.
So now they call you the tax man, the axe man coming?
Yeah.
The axe man does come sometimes. Part of
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that too. Sometimes
sure.
I'm like, this person is gotta go. Not meeting the needs.
Part of our process too requires us to vet the professionals. Mm-hmm. And a good part of the time we keep them all. Sometimes we don't because they've been left behind, and it's pretty clear.
It's the classic case of what got you from there to here won't get you from here to there, right? They serve their purpose. I actually heard this or read this somewhere, and I can't remember where, but I've been using this and speaking to groups about this. It's like, give the employee something along the lines of a graceful exit so they can find their greatness.
That's right.
So.
That's right.
And sometimes we're not even replacing. We're just asking them to be a part of a bigger part of the process instead of having the client go to the professionals and say, I need this, having the professionals come in and say, we're doing a planning session. Let's brainstorm. What does this company need? How can we get them from here to there? Mm-hmm. So part of it sometimes is just actually bringing the professionals more into the process than they even were before. Because some of them have plenty of expertise to do it. They just haven't been asked to do it.
Yeah. Right. And too often, like I say, it's kind of a weird process because as business owners, we have the power and the right to make our own decisions. Mm-hmm. So we, want to tell the CPA firm and the law firm what we want them to do. The problem is the truth is most of the time the business owner isn't qualified to say what they need.
Correct.
Right. And so the law firm and the accounting firm doesn't do them a favor just by doing what they're asked to do, even though it does limit their liability because they just gave them what they asked for.
Right.
So part of the reason that we don't do this work, I did this kind of work for some years in my law firm, but I found it really constricting because the company hires us and then we work with each of the shareholders typically. Sometimes most of the time they're family, but a lot of times they're not too. They're just other, people. Mm-hmm. But we work with them, and then it allows us, like Ellen said, we want to sit in everybody's seat at the table and figure out what would we want if we were them, and what do they think they want, and kind of help them
bridge that.
And then we kind of build a plan out of what we think is going to be the most likely to provide success for everybody at the table,
Right. So it's about being like a servant leader, if you like that term.
I do.
Because it's not self-serving, it's serving the client as opposed to just ringing the cash register, if you will.
Right.
That's right. So it's just nice for them to be able to have a chance to not have conflicts. So because like I said, the lawyers, the question is, okay, who's your client? And then if my client is the main owner, then everybody else needs their own counsel. Maybe even the firm needs its own counsel or what. I don't like to send people into their corners to come out fighting and nothing.
It's adversarial. It becomes adversarial.
I don't want to adversary. When I'm ready for the lawyers, I'll call them.
Yeah. We get I don't know if I should say this, Randy, but what did Shakespeare say about the lawyers? The first thing we should do is kill all of them.
He did.
Or they're the no men. So what do you do when you see a dynamic where in a family there's a power struggle, there's a power play, and it's not really for either one of you to weigh in on, right? Like there might not really be legally or financially the right answer. It might be what's in the best interest of the company, but all roads can lead to Rome, so to speak.
Yeah, I would say the first thing that we try to do is bring reality to the situation. So a lot of times what happens in these, you're talking about lawyer, there's lawyer CPA power dynamics, but also in the family, of certain
That's
parties.
what I meant. I meant the family. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Certain parties want different things. So part of the thing we do is we try to bring reality in. For example, how much should I pay my kid? How much would my kid make on the market versus how much they're making in my family business? And try to bring, for the kids, bring reality to, this is, what you'd actually be worth on the market. This is what you get because you're a part of this family business. And then also for the business owner too, it's about being a third party for them. So having them say, this is what I'm thinking, what are your thoughts on that? And then really just trying to bring everything out into the open, bring the communication, and bring also reality checks to both parties on what's normal for a business. Am I overreaching? Am I underreaching? There's always, in family dynamics, is really interesting. We usually find the kid is either overpaid or underpaid, and almost never correctly paid, if that makes sense. And then how much share should I give to my kid over time? So that's another thing we talk about a lot, is I want to transition it to my child. How do I bring them up in the business? So helping them build almost leadership plans for the kids as they come up. And then what does it look like when they're CEO? And so we talk to the child about, you're going to run a different business than your parents ran, right? This is a different world. And so you're going to do things differently, but we also want you to honor the family legacy in that. And so there's just so many things. So I think part of what we do is just lay it all on the table, have this openness, and then also bring some reality checks on, this is what we see in the business world. This is what we see when we work with family businesses. Here's some examples of good things that we've seen. Here's examples of bad things that we've seen. So a lot of it is just bringing in, expertise and research for all the families that we've worked with.
So then what happens when you have either a husband and a wife, or what I'm currently working with now, two brothers?
Yeah.
And they have a different idea of what they want to give to their children. And then I also want to ask you about when you let children know, not the family business, but the wealth. I had a very wealthy person. He was about to have a sit down with his kids to say, yes, we're rich. I'm like, time out. No, your children are not rich at all. You and your wife are wealthy. And psychologically, if you want to kill your kids' ambition, tell them that they're inheriting a ton of money. But that's younger children. But talk a little bit about the dynamics between the owners when they're at odds, just because they genuinely feel differently. How do you maneuver that?
Yeah, it becomes quite the problem whenever, especially when you've got siblings that are running a business and they are actually co-owners at 50-50. Yes. That is kind of the nightmare.
That's the nightmare, right?
Yeah, and I've seen, I've had some of those where the father stayed in the business until he was 85 running it, and the kids are 60, 62, and the dad dies. And now they don't have a history of running the company, and they're almost ready to retire themselves. And now they're just at war because they're fighting.
Like
over
Prince Charles.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Prince Charles waiting for the Queen.
Just like that. Yeah, it's very sad. But yes, back to the 50-50 thing. Again, we try to come in and we try to paint the picture of them about how they're likely to do separately. What are their options? Because we want them to actually, nobody will say it, oh, well, what if we split the company up, or what if one buys out the other, or whatever. But we present that to everybody, right?
Sure.
Because if they are really having a difficult time getting along, we want them to understand what the other side of that's going to look like if they go to their corners and come out fighting. Because the only people that are going to win in that situation are the lawyers.
Right.
And so we want to get ahead of it and show them the risks ahead of where they're going, how it's going to end, and what are the options between here and there that we could embrace for a better outcome, right? So we try to show them the roads that are available, the possibilities of options. What could they do? Should we go ahead and sell the company because you can't get along? Sometimes we should sell it.
Right.
Sometimes we should bring the kids in, whoever's going to be the heir apparent to run it. Sometimes it's really clear who that's going to be, and we want the owners out. So they retire. Sometimes the company is built on a couple of different sets of skill sets. And so we split the company in half and let each one take.
That's easy. That's probably easy.
That's an easy
skill sets, right?
Easy
Different
one.
Business. Yeah.
Although everybody's, it's funny. A lot of the business owners, if they've been running jointly, it's a little scary for them to go out and take it themselves. And so that's a little trepidation, but if there's a clean cut of possibilities without damaging the revenues of the business, especially, there's just logical customers and, that would go on each side. So there are some easier ones than harder ones, but I tell them also too that it's better for them to resolve this before it gets to the next generation, because then there's going to be more kids, more lawyers, and it just becomes. That's how families in that third generation we're talking about before, they tend to lose the money. The second generation either builds the company or sells it, one of the two, lots of times. But the third ones, they blow the money or the company.
Right. Or both. Yeah.
One creative solution we saw was the parents were over their children, and then they realized this is a terrible idea, and they had the uncle. So one person was under his uncle and the other person was under his uncle, and so they split. They, instead of doing parent child, so that actually worked really well for them. So sometimes it's just who would work better under this person. What are the roles and responsibilities that they're good at? And one question we always ask them is, in 3 years, Dan Sullivan's question, what has to happen in the next 3 years for you to be happy with your progress? And so having them sit down and actually say, I would love it if the business did this. A lot of times they just don't ever say that to each other, or I really want to do this. So a lot of it is just getting them to actually say, this is what success looks like for me. And then and then we try to come up with creative solutions for that.
And what if their answers are different?
Yeah, once they articulate and the other person is able to hear what their view of their future is, what success looks like to them, then it's not a personal attack. Now it's just, this is what I always wanted. This is what, I'd love to see in my own future. And this is mine. And let me hear yours. And now let's see if there's a way that we can, work that out so that we're both able to have what we really want. And so back to Ellen's point and yours earlier, the communication is a really big deal. And we stand kind of between them so that we can hear what they say and then interpret it. And we do that, frankly, for the lawyers too. And the lawyers talking about and then after the lawyer leaves, they're like, "What did he say? Can you go over that meeting for me again?" It's like the tax attorney, that $4 million tax bill that came in. After the tax attorney left, my client grabbed me by the arm and he said, "Don't ever let me be in a meeting with him by myself."
Well, you know what? It's like the tax attorneys in the medical profession. They have their own language. And in some ways, it's a power play, because if you don't understand me, then you'll always need me. Kind of bizarre thing. What have you seen as the top one or two issues that come up that prevent an ideal exit, whatever you think that looks like? And I understand you're there to facilitate the communication and to have look, some people, what do they say? You can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink. You could be the best in the world, and some people just are not going to listen.
So one of them that is a problem, I think, is the owner basically, he refuses to make himself unnecessary to the business. So one of the things that we do when we're going in is we're trying to, part of what we tell the clients is that we want to help you create the business in such a way that it's always ready for an exit. And that's whether or not you leave it to your kids, or whether or not you sell it, or whether or not you keep it or sell it to an insider. I don't care. But a business that is well run is both, as Joe says, easy, lucrative, and fun. And secondly, that well run business that doesn't need you is also worth more money. So a lot of times the owner's ego is in the way because they think the company can't be run without them. And if it can't be run without them for some true reason, then they don't really have a company, they have a job. Right. So getting an owner to understand that our goal for you is to eventually make you unnecessary to this company. What we like to do for the people that want to stay on, we like to get them to the place where they're looking to the future, they're traveling, they're networking, they're doing all the stuff as a PR for the business, but they're not working in the business.
Well, they're working on the business.
They're working on the business. That's
But
exactly
here's
right.
what I've seen though, especially when we'll call it the old man, right?
Yeah.
Running the business.
Yeah.
It could be the ego where they can't let go, even when they verbalize that they want to let go, or it is their only why. It's their only purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be really difficult to disentangle.
It's their identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It does. And that's one that usually that kind of a person has a business that is going to take a while anyway.
That's exactly right.
That person out.
Yeah.
So, you can also start working on them towards the idea that they can use their energy, their intellect, their contacts for so many other things. They can start another business. They can,
That's what
work for
usually
charities.
happens.
Yeah, a lot of things. They can do things for the grandkids, and it just depends on where they are in life and what they have. But, our life doesn't consist of just what we do every day, right? To earn a living.
I hope not.
I hope not is right.
Alan, what were you going to say? Yeah.
I would say choose your hard. I love that statement because it's either going to be hard now or it's going to be hard later. And so, because to do this sort of planning, to do this strategy, to be open and honest in your communication, it's hard. It takes a lot of courage for a business owner to stand up to the people they need to stand up to, right? To have those hard conversations, to do the planning. It takes, it takes a lot of energy and time and effort to do the sort of things that we're talking about. And while we believe that it's worth it by 100 times, because instead you can choose your hard now, but your hard's coming later if you don't. And so I would say the other big mistake we see is business owners say, I just don't want to deal with it now. I'll deal with it later. And they kick that can down the road. And the later just becomes much harder than it would have been now. But they just don't want to do the hard now. And so I would say that's another big, they don't want to stand up to their employees, or they don't want to make the hard choices now. And so they end up having to make hard choices in the future because of it. Or they let the next generation fight it out and have to make the hard because they refuse to.
So that leads us to two other issues. One is, and I'm sure you see this if you're around a table with other professionals, because I am notorious for, I will speak truth to power. That's my job. But many people they'll say it, but they don't execute it because they just want to keep their job. Whereas I promise you, I have said things to CEOs and I'll go home and tell my husband, he's like, you said what? What did he say? I said, well, he laughed. And I reminded him, I told you, when you hired me as your coach or consultant, I will speak truth to power. I have a guy now. It's a financial firm. I don't want to give out too much, although nobody would know. And there's a senior managing partner emeritus, and there's a new one. And the senior one is constantly undermining the new one. And I literally, and the next partner meeting, I'm calling them all out on it because the sidebar conversations are not working. I said, you're never going to be successful as long as this guy, the heir apparent who claims he wants you to be successful, undermines you and sends out emails and returns calls and talks to the lawyers before, and like you're at the meetings and people are like, but you're saying what everybody else is thinking.
That's right.
Right. So how do you handle when you see that's not done? And then I'll add to that just a commentary. You choose your hard, right? So we know emotions that are repressed just get amplified. So you're not just choosing your hard, you're actually choosing to make your hard harder.
Yep.
Right. So what do you do with that when you hear the BS flying?
Well, as we mentioned before, we tell everybody when we come in that what we're going to do is we're going to bring everything into the light, right?
Okay.
When we say everything into the light, that means we're going to put it on the table.
Everything. Yeah.
Let me say, and your whole world is about trust. I understand that. Ours is very, very much about that, because when we're hired, we always tell them, listen, when we come in, we're going to know more about you than your lawyer, than your doctor, than your priest or your pastor or whoever, and sometimes your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
So because we delve into each of the parts of their lives, and so we learn, and we see the big picture. We put it all together. That makes issues jump off the page at us, which we have to bring up and deal with.
Let me just commentary. And because you delve in,
yeah,
when you get to it, there usually many times there's a discrepancy within somebody. So then how do you handle that? Because right, they're not. There's a common denominator, but there's discrepancies. Like, wow,
right.
This is black.
Confronting the inconsistencies, because let's face it, we're all human, and
Mm-hmm.
we all have some inconsistencies in the way we in the things we do compared to what we think or what we believe, right? Nobody lives this whatever perfectly. So sometimes, I've had to ask people to stop having affairs. I've had to stop them. I've had to ask them, to forgive their kid.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to ask the kids to forgive the parents. I mean, one of the things that just breaks my heart is when I'm dealing with people and they tell me, and it is this, I know, it is very common for some parent to tell me that one of their kids has no relationship with them and they can't see the grandkids. And it is, I can't tell you how much weeping I've had in my office over that issue with families. And so I try to always push this back to our clients to let them know that they want to preserve their family relationships above anything and everything else. And once they're broken, if they're broken to a certain extent, it's very, 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 very hard to recover it.
Mm-hmm.
So
but you can. But of course, both parties, and again, their spouses that aren't blood, all parties must start with wanting to.
They do. And there has to be forgiveness. And the people, it isn't that I just have to forgive. For it to really work on both sides have to admit to their own wrong and ask for forgiveness for their part. Whether it's 90-10 or 50-50 or whatever it is, I've never seen it where there is, no fault on one of the other sides.
Yeah. Did you ever hear my 10-minute talk, Randy?
I don't.
Where I did the beach ball for the Genius. I'm talking about the Genius Network that Randy and I are a part of. And the reason that's the whole thing about your perspective, right? For the truth. And then also what is so important is what I tell people all the time. If you think somebody is ever going to come around and see your perspective by claiming that you're 100% right and they're 100% wrong, you are waiting for Godot.
You are.
It is, even if you take responsibility for 5%, 2%, that's the only way you can start to move the needle, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah. So the trust thing and the family thing, the combination of that, can be fireworks, and it can also be like total beauty. I mean, I have to say, we have some families. When we work with clients, sometimes we will work with them as short as 6 months. A lot of times it's 2 or 3 or 4 years. And we have some in the 8th or 9th year with us, that just don't want to let us go. But the conflicts, and once you kind of help them resolve certain things, the family calms down and settles down, and then you can start doing the planning that benefits everybody. Right. And so we know that example I told you about, where the parents were leaving 90% to the son and 10% to the daughter. Well, we cleaned all that up. We've worked on cleaning up the relationship between the spouses, because we discovered that the women in the family weren't really sure they were even going to be taken care of, and what would happen if their husbands died, because it was a family business down the male line. And so it was just removing all these pieces. I mean, those people have come back to me and said, my marriage has never been better. Well, it's because there was this thing that was like there that the males probably didn't even realize, but it was real to the females. And so we tend to be, and Ellen will tell you this, we tend to be loved by the females after this is, they're kind of, they don't want to open their family to anybody. But once this is like going forward and they realize that a good part of what we're there for is to protect them and to make sure they understand what's going on and how things are going to be, for them. So the planning isn't just for, it's for everybody.
Right. Well, what happens is what I've come across is if you're perceived as being paid by the male owner, then you're representing them. So they don't know that they can trust you or not. But as you know, Ellen, once women know they can trust you, we are incredibly loyal.
Oh, yes. I would say he hasn't said this before, but a lot of times, and it's not just, the wives, or a lot of times it's shareholders or owners, but a lot of times we'll hear now, and once they trust you, they'll say, whatever happens, we're keeping you. So just so you know, you're on the ride with us now. So that's 100% true.
Right. So what happens when there's a situation where the best interest of the firm and or the best interest of the family is not the choice that's chosen? How do you handle that?
Usually it depends on how things are set up, of course. Sometimes the best interest of the family isn't the best interest of the company and vice versa. Sometimes they both align really well. But if they don't align and the family chooses, I would say if you can't align both of these so that the choices are good for the whole thing, then you choose the family. There's just no doubt about it. Because we can all start and build businesses, but once the family is broken, it is forever. It's broken. And then even if everybody goes on and remarries and does all this stuff, it doesn't matter. The damage, the children, the impact on them, on the spouses themselves. I mean, they're going to carry these wounds that are going to impact them the rest of their life. And so
for generations,
we want them to always lean. That's right. Always lean to the family. That's what we.
But I would say too, when we start, we say our job is to give you the options, tell you which one we think is the best, but ultimately, it's their choice at the end of the day. So ultimately they have the responsibility for their family and for their business. And we're just here to advise them and give them, our best. This is our best. This is what we think is best. But here's the pros and cons for each of the decisions. And so really our job is to help them see the ramifications and the consequences and the pros and the cons of the options. And then ultimately, it's up to them. We can't take personal responsibility for what they decide to do. That's ultimately up to them. So we never make decisions for them, right? Our job isn't to make their decisions for them. Our job is to help them through it.
But we do know, we've all experienced it where you do all that and then they say, but if you were in my shoes, what would you do?
Yeah, sure.
And
that's what we always answer. Because every time, because our answers are just this. If I were you, knowing what I know about you in this whole situation, this is what I would do. And this is why. There are these other options, but I would choose this one if it were me. We make it clear every time.
All right. So since we have a father-daughter team here, which just makes my heart sing, like when you guys agreed to do this podcast, it just makes my heart sing. Tell us how this came about, how you are working together. I don't know, are you even in the same location? Are you doing everything remote? Randy, you have 5 children, so I don't know if all your other children work with you. Tell us about your family dynamic in business.
I'll let Ellen tell from her side.
Okay, sure. I was working in town, but I decided to do fine.
And in town is where?
In Wilmington, North Carolina.
Okay.
So after college, I moved to Wilmington. I worked for a couple consulting firms, kind of moonlighted around. And then I decided I wanted to go into financial planning. So I started looking around at investment firms. And it just so happened that Dad walked into the place I was working and I told him I was looking for financial firms, and he had a small family office in California. And so he said, well, if you want to do finance, then you should come work for me. So I went to all my business mentors because I had other job offers, and I was like, what should I do? And they all said, Ellen, if I were you, I go work with, you have a great relationship with your dad. He's going to care about you. He's going to invest way more into you than anyone else, which is also why we love family business, right? Mm-hmm. And so I started working with him in the finance firm for a couple of years, but really I loved business consulting. I got my MBA and I love business. And so he had done business consulting through the law firms, sort of through the wealth management firm, but it kind of got to the point where we were just doing business consulting. And so we decided to start a company. So 7 years ago, we started, almost 8, I think now, just a consulting firm. So I probably work 90 in the consulting firm, and then I still help some in the investment firm keep up. It's a family business. So, and then sibling wise, it's been really fun. I feel like all my siblings have moonlighted in one kind or the other. My brother came for a year and he worked with us before he went to law school, and my other brother became an engineer. So he came in and did all of our tech stuff, all our videos. He set up our office. So I'm the only one who's really stuck it out, but I would say everyone has done their time, at least in some capacity or another. My sister is a fantastic editor. So she was the one who edited all the books. Yeah. So that's what I say about when you have family that has a culture and is talented and is growing and learning and has good relationships, you can really, there's just so many more options that you have at your fingertips. So we've tried to use all the gifts and talents we possibly can.
Yeah. Awesome. Randy?
Yeah. And
what are you feeling when you hear your daughter say that? As a dad, what are you feeling?
Well, I'm thankful to the good Lord that he has given us the chance to have the 5 kids. My wife decided, she was a physical therapist. Mm-hmm. She decided to stay home, with the kids because she didn't want somebody else raising them. Mm-hmm. And so she did that. And then she's like she's probably the most gifted little kid teacher I've ever seen in my life. Mm-hmm. She is incredible.
Did you homeschool?
Yes. The kids, all but the youngest one was homeschooled through the 8th grade. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then we, kicked them out we sent them to Christian high school, and they were ready to go. And we wanted them to, have the experience of being in a school, mm-hmm. that sort of thing too. But
you have to learn how to throw spitballs, right? I mean,
sure. I mean, we were super, super busy. We were always skiing and the girls played ball. Everybody played sports all the time. And we were a very, very active family. So they were always around people. It wasn't like they were isolated in any.
Oh, that's a misconception about homeschooling. It right? Is. That's a very, and it's becoming more and more and more accepted. And
it is. There's millions of kids now that are homeschooled. I mean, it's become a big deal, but
there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of reasons for that.
There are a lot.
Too. We also taught each other. I taught an economics class for a group of high schoolers when I was in college for the summer, because I was a econ, accounting, business major. So, I think they were very creative too in how we did it. So I came home for a summer and taught a homeschool class to like 10 kids doing economics, and my brother was a part of that. And my sister, I think she taught an English class to a bunch of homeschoolers when she was working. She did it at nights. So it's fun.
And we would hire college professors to teach our kids, so we were, and then of course, because I was self-employed my whole career, when everybody else was in school, we'd go skiing or to Hawaii or.
So you didn't have to pay during peak season and it's crowded and.
That's right. So big benefits there, but I've loved the whole family thing. We're not perfect by any stretch, and we have our own little conflicts here and there, but we love each other, and we're able to forgive and we just love spending time together. I mean, what Ellen says is true. We love being together with our kids and with our grandkids and they love spending time with each other. So we're really blessed as a family, and it gives us a chance to be able to share some of those, some of the things that we learned that help make us successful. We can share with other, business owners and their families. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they have problems that jump off the page that we're like, this is not going to end well. right here.
I did want to go back because you mentioned how do wealthy, business owners and families, how do they transfer that knowledge to their kids? And I think that is something that dad and mom did a really good job of, which is we think it's so important along the way that they're learning how to manage finances. And so,
financial literacy,
financial literacy, and also the family value, how the family sees finances is very important, right? Because money, there's so much behind money, right? It's not just a dollar bill, right? There's emotions, there's lessons, there's, does the family consider it stewardship? So I think when you teach your kids about stewardship and how this money is a tool for the things that we really care about, and like you said, back to it's our money first, right? And if we decide to give some of it to you, that's our decision, but there's no guarantee, right? We're not guaranteeing that you're going to get a certain amount. And so, even the way that we set up trust, the way we like to set up the trust is the kids learn, even if they do have a trust, they're learning how to manage it along the way with someone else helping them. And then, if we think they're responsible, then we give the trust over to them because they've shown and proven that they know how to use money, that they're good stewards of the money, right? So much of it is what are the lessons and the values that you're transferring to them along the way. And also that you're giving them the opportunity to learn from their own mistakes along the way too, because the last thing we want is for a kid to have no responsibility at all and all of a sudden have a huge chunk of cash, right? That's the worst case scenario. So to me, it's all about how do we transfer the lessons and the knowledge and the values of the family along the way so that when those moments come, they're ready and responsible with it.
I'm so glad you brought that up because my second book is on women and money called Money Can Buy You Happiness, Secrets Women Need to Know to Get Paid What They're Worth. But what I actually did since then, I've spoken to some other financial groups at their events where I created 5 money personalities. And it's all about emotion, right? A dollar bill is just a commodity. It's what it represents for you. It's how you value it. Are you a spender? Are you a saver? Are you a worrier about it? And so there's so many emotional dynamics to money, and couples and businesses fight about money all the time. And many times it has nothing to do about the money.
Yeah.
Nothing. Now, Randy, I know we only have a couple of more minutes. So I just want to wrap up here, although I could talk to you all day about all of this stuff. So I have a question for each of you. I usually have 2, but I'll narrow it down to just one since we're running out of time. And that is, what is the last book that you reread and why? Little twist there, right?
Yeah, I love that. I'll let him keep thinking. Atomic Habits is one of my favorites. So
okay,
I've reread that. I just think having right habits in your life, I think is just so important. And so creating those habits, I think is so. I love that book. James Clear's Atomic Habits is definitely.
I think he was a student of B.J. Fogg's, right? Tiny Habits.
Yeah.
That's right. So I just thought about what was the last book. So the last book that I reread was the book of Judges in the Bible.
And because
I try to read the Bible through every year.
Really? Wow.
Beginning to end. I don't make it every single year, but most of the years I make it. And so I'm just finishing the book of Judges right now, which is a fascinating book. But
what's the one fascinating thing?
It's just it's being able to see how, sort of Israel went through this whole, they would this cycle, if you will. They would serve the Lord, and the Lord would prosper them, and then they would turn their backs and serve other gods, and then the Lord would have to take them down, and then they would be under somebody else's boot, and then they would cry out to the Lord, and he would send them during that period of time. He would send them, a judge to basically free them and to reestablish them. And so it's just interesting how it would be nice if we would learn the lessons instead of having to go through,
Well, unfortunately, look at what, this is being interviewed during the war in Ukraine. And it's have we learned nothing? No. Have we learned nothing? All right. So tell listeners how they can find out more about you, learn about you. Where would you like them to go?
Longbusinessadvisors.com is our website. So we have a contact page all of that. That's probably the best place to go for most of our stuff. We have a Facebook page and stuff, but we're pretty boutique. And so a lot of our stuff is word of mouth. We do podcasts and videos. So that's all on the website too. We have a YouTube channel. So yeah, Long Business Advisors, check us out.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And as I promised, Randy and Ellen Long did not disappoint. So make sure you comment, share, subscribe to today's podcast. Till next time.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.